in defense of Sugar Ray Robinson, his record has a lot of non-title fights against nondescript opposition. I mean, I'm not going to try and pretty it up. They were nondescript, to say the least. But in saying that, a lot of them guys were good fighters. You know, they were good fighters. But what you have to do is check the paradigm shift in, you know what I mean, like, it's just basic shit in eras or eras, you know what I mean, depending on your pronunciation once again. Like some of them 10 rounders, if you weigh up the opponents them days, they were good fight, but they might have not have had the opportunity of having a sponsor, a good manager, a promoter, a backer, so they can fight full time. Most of them fighters them days wasn't just boxing alone, you know, to supplement their incomes. I mean, probably up to 10 round fighters, not just novice fighters, but, you know, established pros. Even contenders on the verge of doing something, a lot of them, unless, you know, they had the backing from way back, a lot of them, you know, they couldn't give up their jobs until they probably had a guaranteed eliminator or title shot. Obviously, when you're fighting for a world title, you have to be full-time. You know what I mean? You have to be full-time. And I'm even guessing that some guys who challenged for world titles back then didn't even get that luxury. I'm guessing that. Like, in the UK, we have football. Proper football, not your gridiron bullshit. Not really. But these days they earn, you know, ridiculous, man, like £150,000 a week, 80 grand a week is low wages now. 80 grand a week in the Premiership is low wages. But before Jimmy Hill, he used to host the Match of the Day program. But when he used to play in the 50s, I think towards the end of his playing career, he revolutionized the whole system of football. I'm not sure what organized it, if he started the PFA, but he started some kind of body. And I don't have all the facts, but, you know, the players were getting a proper wage structure now, you know, and, you know, they were like, in those days, like, famous footballers would earn just maybe slightly more than the milkman or the postman, not much more. Maybe £20 more than a milkman or a postman, if that. You know? Floyd Mayweather, he couldn't sell a fight now where he's fighting somebody who is driving a truck around or doing labouring on a building site, because we're going to be saying, well, how are you fighting this guy here? He's not even a full-time pro. The television networks, they wouldn't accept Floyd fighting an opponent like that. You know, even if they knew from word from the gyms that, yo, this guy might have a lot of losses, but he knows his shit. He knows how to fight. Let's say like an Emmanuel Burton, you know, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, Floyd fought him before Floyd was Floyd, right? But even with all the losses on his records, he was better than a lot of guys getting title shots in the top 10. Better than some guys who held belts, right? They were talking about Jonathan Thaxton from England as a world title challenger. He was undefeated. He was a knockout puncher. They brought Emmanuel Burton over here, and he just destroyed him. Yeah? So the television networks wouldn't accept that because the record doesn't look pretty enough. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? And they've changed the way they showcase boxing to the public. Because, let's face it, the public are fucking stupid. You know? Organic vegetables. They say, oh, they're so expensive to manufacture. That's why they're more expensive than the shit that's been sprayed with God knows what fucking pesticide. No. That's not necessarily why it costs much more, right? The reason organic vegetables are not readily available at a cheap price is because you guys want to see a big round green apple. You know what I mean? You get what I'm saying? You want to see a carrot that's not bent in the stem or nothing like that. You want to see that. That's not organic. When it comes out organic, it's going to be slightly bent. It's not going to look perfectly shaped. But you don't want that. You don't want that. So you get what you get. You know what I mean? And it's the same with an unbeaten record. You want to see, okay, oh, he's got 30 or 40 wins. He's knocked out 35 guys. You know what I mean? Tomato cans, pronunciation again. You know, that's what you want. And that's what you get. You won't even question the announcers or commentators if they don't say anything about his resume may have holes in it. As far as you're concerned, you're watching a world-class fight. You don't even want to do any research for yourself. Even though these days Google is just a click away from you on either your mobile phone, PC, or laptop or whatever. You don't want to even do that, you know? Like back in the day, you know, fights like and look, these are not world title fights. I'm talking about Ron Lyle versus Joe Bugner, you know, or even Joe Bugner versus Shavers, you know. And them days they used to put on 10-round and 12-round fights with no belt attached to the fight, you know, and they could head the bill. They'd get on television. Right? They wasn't scared to put a headline bout without a belt attached to it. They wasn't scared to do that because they knew that Bugner was the best in the UK. Lyle and Frazier were the top echelon world challengers in the world. We could sell the fight. It's as simple as that. I remember back in the 80s, in the mid-80s, when Barry McGuigan fought Juan Laporte. I think it was just maybe the fight before he challenged for the title. That was a 10-rounder. No title, just a 10-rounder, right? And because the terrestrial networks, I think it was on BBC One. It was either on ITV or BBC, probably BBC One. They didn't have to compete with cable or any outside entities for that prime time spot. They just had the whole ball court for themselves. You know, they didn't have to attach no fucking belt to it. You know? Juan Laporte was a tough contender. Barry McGuigan was the top contender for the featherweight title. You know, if that fight was today, you know they would have to attach some kind of belt to it. That's what they would do. You know, but you tell me the last time you seen a boxing bill and the headline fight hasn't had some kind of belt attached to it. They're too scared not to do it, right? The dynamics have shifted. I remember reading the boxing news in the 80s, and there was an article on a fighter named Chuck Davey, a welterweight. He went the distance with Carmen Basilio twice. Gavilan TKO'd him in 10. But in general, he'd go the distance and he'd win 10-rounders. And the TV networks loved him. You know why? Because they knew he wasn't a hard puncher, right? And he wasn't a major world title contender. I'm not even sure if he got a shot at the title. Yeah, I mean, he might have done, but I'm not even sure, right? But they loved him because he'd always give them rounds. That was guaranteed. He'd always give them rounds. And basically, in that era when they were showcasing boxing, between rounds would be advertisements. So if he's in a 10-rounder or a 15-rounder, he's giving them 9 advertisement slots or 14 advertisement slots because he's giving them rounds. So they loved him. You don't get that shit no more. You know, they fucked all that up, man, with the 15-rounders. Like, you know, as I stated on a few occasions, they didn't do it because it was safe for the boxers, because there was no empirical studies to back that argument up. They reduced it from 15 to 12 to condense the time of the broadcast, basically, just to shorten the span of the broadcast. Like, even with popular music, you know, on radio, they've done a similar thing. I'll probably say from the 80s they started doing it. Like, you had Queen, that song Bohemian Rhapsody. It's about 6 minutes long. Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight, that goes on for fucking ever, right? You can't make them records no more. You have to condense it down to 3 minutes so you can get everybody in their slot. And it's, you know, we're just accommodating a new model of business, a new time zone of how they're trying to cramp everything into that space. You get what I'm saying? Revenue dollars. More programs, more revenue dollars. You know, they did it for advertisement. That's why, you know, the radio and the boxing scheduling was changed like that. Advertisement. That's what it was done for. Like, I'm not going to mention no names, but there's fighters today who are not bad, but they're just not great. They're just not great. And like, they're probably, you know, some of them maybe even in the top 10 of one of the governing bodies, or maybe even slightly below. And they've got people backing them. They're boxing full time, at least for now, until their investors say, well, we can't pump no more money into you because this thing is going nowhere. Until that happens, that's what they're doing. Like, if this same fighter was fighting back then, he'd have to be pushing a truck. And he'd have to be fighting because he loves fighting, you know? The emphasis on unbeaten records is a modern day phenomenon to a degree, you know? It's a modern day phenomenon. I suppose it was more of an optimistic time back then. Like, even if you look at the Rocky film, it's based on a real true story from Chuck Wepner, who was basically, I don't know, a gatekeeper, a journeyman, yeah? And he got a shot at Muhammad Ali. And the Rocky film is based on, you got to have a dream, and you never know what could happen with the dream. I mean, what about James J. Braddock? The man lost several times. He was collecting welfare. He was forced to work on the docks because boxing just wasn't paying no dough. He got called in at late notice to fight Max Baer for the heavyweight title. And he won the fight. You know, Russell Crowe even made a film about it. His nickname was the Cinderella Man, and that's the name of the film. And I'm going to have to watch that one day. You know? I mean, I'm not saying that was happening every week back then, but you rarely hear stories like that in boxing today. I mean, okay, you have, is it Orlando Salido, who had a torrid start to his career where they pitched him in early, and you have the Carson Jones. So, I mean, to a degree, you have guys who come back to make respectable careers. But Carson Jones wasn't drawing welfare, I don't think, you know what I mean? Or working on the docks. I'm not sure about Salido's situation, but it's probably nothing in comparison to what guys like Braddock and Jersey Joe Walcott, you know, he went through some shit before he won his title in his personal life with his finances and shit like that, you know what I mean? Hard times. Hard times, man. You know, and yeah, even today, fighters today, they don't get it all their own way. Over here, we got a fighter named Rendell Monroe. He's a dustbinman, and he's held, I think, either British and Commonwealth titles, you know what I mean? At that kind of level. And I think even up to today, he's still a dustman, you know? Back in the days in the 80s and the 90s, you had Tony Thornton, the punching postman, and Dwyer recently done a video about Peter Manfredo, who's fighting again soon. How he's got to, you know, work 9 to 5 and still try and figure a way how he's going to make a career out of boxing, you know? I mean, the harsh realities are, if you're not a ticket seller, you might have to be looking at alternative employment to supplement what you do in the ring. There's no way around it. There's no way around it. That's why, and this is just my opinion, right? You cannot gauge fighters of today, right, solely on their resume. If you're gauging fighters today and you're having a debate or a discussion, if you're not bringing the business aspect into what's happening, then, you know, your argument has to be compromised a little, because it's just majority rules. That's how it runs. We live in a capitalistic system, you know. You can't really have sports without the / entertainment. It's just how it goes. Do I like it? Not necessarily. I can deal with it, but that's just how it goes. In them days, when Robinson was fighting, they didn't expect you necessarily to be a great fighter because you was unbeaten. They'd expect you to perform in the ring because they know what you can do. They know what your skill set is like. Your entertainment value was probably more important than how much O's and W's you had on your record, you know? If you do the history, guys like Mac Foster, KO puncher, I think they saw through guys like that. He had a long unbeaten streak, and the boxing writers wasn't impressed. So what? You know what I mean? And like, you know, that really wasn't, that's a modern day phenomenon. That's to sell fights to networks and to fickle fans. There was a white heavyweight back in the days. His name was Young Scribbling. He's got one of the highest or largest KO, winning KO streaks in boxing history. How come the historians didn't have him down as a future Hall of Famer? How come we don't talk about him as a Hall of Famer? Because they knew the time. They knew that, you know, he might not have been the worst fighter in the world, but yo, who was he knocking out? Someone might read about Stripling, who committed suicide actually later in his career, and see all the knockouts and say, wow, this guy's better than Jack Dempsey, he's better than Tyson. But it doesn't tell the full picture. It just doesn't tell the full picture, you know? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you have to do a social study as well as a boxing study. I know it looks like I'm going way off base, but no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not. Because there was different factors. The mobs were extorting the entire city. Any business in the city, they was extorting it. They was in boxing. There was a lot of good contenders who could only go so far because, you know, they wasn't hooked up with the mob. Some of them actually point blank refused. Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson, well, especially Sugar Ray Robinson, I think LaMotta only came out in his later years saying fuck the mob and the shit like that. But Robinson refused to deal with him. And there was other fighters who refused to deal with him, you know. Costamato stood against him. But a lot of fighters conformed. And there was a lot of fighters who didn't conform. And some of them caught a beat down or even worse. Yeah, right? You know what I mean? Or end up in a river somewhere. And some of them got their dreams broken because they realized unless they fuck with them, they wasn't going anywhere. Yeah? So when you see their records and, you know, there's losses here, remember some of them fights were fixed. Yeah? Remember some of them fights were when these contenders just lost all ambition because they couldn't go any further. Yeah? It's not like today. If you go back even further than that, a lot of the results that we see in Boxrec were later rendered by newspapers, not by judges and shit like that. The newspapers used to render a lot of them decisions. And, of course, they had certain agendas and certain allegiances and certain financial motivations to pick certain fighters. Of course they did, you know? So, and like, them days, they used to give out a lot of no decisions when they couldn't decide. So, the Boxrec, you know, it doesn't favor old school fighters in terms of clarity, because unless you know the components of how boxing was running back then and you fully understand it, then, you know, you're not getting the full picture. You're just not getting the full picture. There's a lot of fighters who would be better fighters if they had a couple of L's on their records, but they're just being fed tomato cans, not learning shit. Yeah? They would have been better if you just, you know, just pitch him in the fucking inferno and let him just fight his way out of the fire. Yeah, get scarred a little bit, but yeah, he wouldn't just, he'd wear a fireproof suit next time and go inside the fire. You know what I mean? But, you know, there's a lot of fighters who get babied. And obviously, to a degree, it's sort of, it doesn't help the sport, really. It doesn't help the sport, you know. I just think about the turmoil that Floyd Patterson must have went through. He knew he was going to get knocked out by Liston. His management told him. But he still went through with the fight. He got beaten up so badly, the man was wearing disguises because he was so embarrassed that he got manhandled that easy. But it was a choice for him. Either take the humiliation that would come at getting demolished by Liston, or being a fraud. And, you know, I suppose it helped him sleep easier. And let's not get it twisted, yeah? Let's not get it twisted. The fact that, this is the balance I'm going to try and get into my argument. The fact that guys like Mayweather and Ward are able to fight full time and they're very skilled at what they do. Yeah. Let's not get it twisted. Their unbeaten records are not man-made, manufactured or hyped. No, they're not. They're not. They're just not. Right? Is there clever matchmaking involved in what they've did? Yes, of course there is. Let's not, you know what I mean, get it twisted. Like, you see, and that's why I have to keep stopping my videos a lot. What I said there is not a blanket statement. What I said there works in degrees, because you get guys like Sven Oki, like, damn. Former IBF super middleweight champion, undefeated in so many fights, and he had so many defenses. But the amount of gift decisions he got, and just he never fought out of Germany, and to be honest, neither do a lot of American fighters, right? And he just got a lot of gifts, yeah. And without being disrespectful, he got a lot of assistance from crooked judges and referees. Truth, fact. And he just had a lot of advantages put in his favor. But guys like Floyd and Ward, they've had to work for a certain spot. And now they're in a position where they can control their environment a little more. Because on paper, Kelly Pavlik is a decent opponent. He is. He's a decent opponent. How much he's lost twice to Bernard Hopkins, Sergio Martinez. Both on points, It's probably, I'm not going to go into who he could have fought who was more dangerous, but I don't think it's the hardest bout that Ward could have took. But, he's worked for his spot. He's controlling his environment. I'm sure he's going to go into some more super fights, And to a degree, you can attribute a similar story to Floyd, Errol Jarrett will tell you what happens when fighters try to take charge of picking opponents and everything, yeah? These are specialist positions, matchmaking. We might curse these people out, but these motherfuckers know what they're doing, yeah? But let's get back to the point I'm making. There's a lot of fighters, probably Robinson, Armstrong, and a few more, they would have probably had unbeaten records today if they had all the advantages that, if you want to call them advantages, I don't call it advantages. You live in the era you live in, and you stand ranked amongst the greats just for your time zone. There's you can't wish that you was from some different era. You know what I mean? You're born when you're born, and it is what it is now, and it was what it was then. But yeah, let's not get it twisted. The advantages for elite fighters like Ward and Floyd is evident to see what you can do when you have time to prepare. You know what I mean? You can't really blame fighters today that they have the option not to go in the ring if they're not 100%. I'm talking about elite fighters. You can't really blame them for that, They have the luxury that their finances don't push them into them precarious positions. And, more power to them, man. More power to them. And, look, let's not just down modern day fighters like that, right? Not any and anybody, even with the aids of a good matchmaker, promotion, getting favourable things in your advantage, like small rings and different punches, gloves, disc gloves, boxers, gloves, whatever, yeah? You could have all that. You could have all the financial advantages, of just being able to focus on your fight and still not make the grade. There's stacks of fighters. So let's not downplay their achievements, yeah? What they do in the ring is what they do in the ring, and they do it well. Bottom line. Right? I am not going to hammer all the journeymen that all the fighters fought back then. You know what I mean? Henry Armstrong, Robinson. I am not going to do that because I know some of them knew their trade. You know what I mean? Trust me. A lot of them were picking up valuable knowledge in some of them losses, which they wouldn't have lost if they was full-time fighters, more than likely. Yeah? Some of them, you can't even measure their value, as top-class sparring partners, for instance, which I guess would be one of the major ways they could supplement some of their income, And they'd probably have to spar more than they fight, you know what I mean? Some of them would have to concentrate more on sparring than fighting, just to get that dough. So I'm not going to go too hard on that. I'm just saying I can't verify how good they were. I need to do a real study, and I just probably, not that I don't have the time, I haven't taken the time to do that. And maybe that's something, maybe me or some of you YouTubers, instead of just reading out their resumes and their record and saying they were bums, why don't you actually find out? I need to actually get into 1940, actually research the climate, you know, and shit like that, and then study the journeyman that he was fighting, and, you know what I mean, their amateur background, try and get some footage, or try and read some footnotes of how talented they were, and shit like that. But we're not doing that. We're just, you know what I mean, basically we're living in 2012 thinking that we have knowledge of something that we haven't lived in, you know. To be a true historian, you have to put your mind frame back into that time, or you can't really. You can give a good account of what happened then, but all you really have is a statistical account of times, dates, and, you know, what belt it was or where the event took place. That's all you have, man. You know what I mean? But, you know, to really go deep, you have to put your mind frame and your time frame into your project back into the 50s or 40s or whenever you're tracking Robinson's career. Boxrec doesn't give you the full picture. It gives you names, times, dates, which is vital. That's your building block. But it's not the story. That's not the story. That's just times and dates and names. Yeah? It's a brilliant tool, but it's just your building block. It's like if you was to Boxrec an old school fighter from the 50s, let's say the Coco Kid. You'd be saying, oh, okay, look at Coco. And I haven't got Coco Kid's record, yeah? But let's say, okay, he's had 60 fights, 70, 80 fights or whatever, and he's lost 15 times and this and that. Oh, he's a bum. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. He was a systematic symptom of what was happening back then, yeah, to a lot of black fighters. He didn't get the breaks that a lot of less gifted fighters today are getting. Right? He was avoided like the plague. Yeah? You need to really do the study on a lot of this shit, or you're just going to be passing on bad information. You don't want to do that to the next generation. This guy never got a title shot. He was in the Black Murderers Row. You see? It's just names, dates, and times. It's just a building block. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to tell you too much about the Black Murderers Row. Go and type it into YouTube or your Google search bar. Murderers Row, Black Murderers Row, and boxing. And you're going to learn something if you don't know about them already. That's why you see people do reenactments, you know, for certain periods of the past. Like they do reenactments of certain battles, wars, or I don't know. Is it the Dark Ages and shit like that? Middle Ages, medieval, whatever. You know, they do reenactments. It's not just for fun so they can dress up in costumes. Well, that's part of it. Yeah, they want to have fun. But there's actually an educational purpose behind it. You know, by gathering up all the knowledge and then doing the reenactment, you actually, you know, you start to invoke certain spirits. You start to embody some of the personalities of that time period, you know. You start to have an affinity of what it was like in that time period. You can never know what it was quite like, but once you get into character, it just helps you, it enables you to bind all the stuff that you've read about these time periods that you're reenacting. It helps you to bind all the information together a little better. That's what it does. There's a science behind it, you know? And it just makes any documentary or documents that you have on that time period that more cohesive, you know? There's an actual science to that. Remember the autobiographic film of Malcolm X with Denzel Washington playing it? Tell me there wasn't times that you just forgot that he was Denzel Washington because he was in the zone. At times you think, oh, it's Malcolm X. Because he was in the... That's because... It's not because, you know, makeup. No, he was in the zone. He was in the zone. And you actually forgot he was acting. This was Malcolm X. That's because he got into character and got into the zone. You know what I mean? So I'm going a bit deep, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying we have to go, yeah, we don't have to go as deep as what I'm saying, but thorough research is really needed, you know, of the boxing game back then. Can't forget the influence the mob had. They made how many journeyman throw fights? And champions, but it was easier with journeymen because they didn't have quite such a high profile. The Journeyman, they really got it stuck to them, you know what I mean? Shit like that. How many fights did they have to throw? You know? I was really hoping by now that there would be some real old schoolers, some old boys, you know what I mean, doing some channels, you know? Just putting some of the shit to right. And yeah, we'd contest some of their points because, you know, they'd have their bias. Not necessarily, but, you know, I'm sure some of them would have some brilliant channels, but they'd have a little edge of bias, you know? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? But we do need to get some more balance. And until either the research or some of the old timers start doing channels, a lot of these debates are just going to be very fragmented, and they're going to run over the same ground time and time again. And you see, that is why it's important not just to let the old guys be the historians. It's important that we are the historians, because there's a lot of things that the old timers will tell you. Like when Jack Dempsey fought Jess Willard. Yeah, he fractured 3 of his ribs and he broke his face and this and that. That didn't happen. That did not happen. Yeah, give him a good beating. Yeah, he got a good beating. I mean, there was some damage there, but the injuries were nowhere near as pronounced as eye sockets, jaws, and ribs getting... No. And I'm not picking on Jack Dempsey, but I've got another scenario with Jack Dempsey in mind. When he fought Louis Firpo, the guy who knocked him outside the ring and he had to climb back in, and he came back in and knocked him out. Like, you know, they build the fighters... What was they calling Firpo? The wild bull of the pampas. He was supposed to be some wild person from, I don't know what I mean, like, some bullfighter, I don't know. But, you know, I mean, he was just a average fighter, had a good punch. He was a farm worker. He wasn't this bandolero type character they were trying to portray him as. But, you know, that was a propaganda exercise to make Jack Dempsey look like, woo! You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Superman. That's what that was. That's why it's important for us, our generation, to do the research. Because not only are we correcting ourselves from our ignorance, we're correcting a lot of the lies that the old timers are telling us. You know when you're young and then you have an uncle telling you a story about something and he'd really get into it and say, yeah, Sonny Liston had hands the size of basketballs and read and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, we're probably going to do the same to our grandkids. So I think at this mark I'm going to cut this video. This resume shit, I can't put it down. I'm probably going to do another video soon because I've got a lot of information that I wanted to dispense, but it's just going to be overkill right now. So I'll be back with more of this shit soon. Peace out.